And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Sunday, January 26, 2025. And we continue to have very active weather across the state thanks to a large, warm, and very wet low pressure system. Now, depending on where you fall with this system, some areas are experiencing unusually warm, wet weather with flooding potential, avalanche threats. Areas where the precipitation is falling as snow, we're talking heavy snow, blowing snow, and then there's a in-between zone where there has even been some heavy freezing rain. Now, as of this Sunday, the low is taking a track northeastward. It will be crossing Cape Newingham in the late afternoon and then moving inland into the southwest interior up through the middle Yukon Valley by Monday morning. The low will then split, leaving a piece back toward Kotzebue Sound while the other section heads eastward toward the Yukon Flats just south of the Brooks Range as we go through Monday into early Tuesday morning. Meanwhile, we've had this atmospheric river of heavy rain focus this Sunday morning and afternoon along the eastern Kenai, Prince William Sound, Cape Suckling, shifting toward Yakutat. That will eventually fold over and head into the Panhandle tonight and on Monday, though not as strong of a feature as what it has been this weekend over this portion of the Gulf. So we have widespread IFR conditions and nasty winter weather here. Low ceilings, low visibility, areas of light and moderate snow will be expanding further north and westward. We've had an area of heavy freezing rain around McGrath, quite a significant ice storm there. So that is causing a lot of problems, whereas you just go further west toward the Yukon River, it's been heavy snow. Same thing, not quite as heavy freezing rain, but also reported around Menchumina and down toward Sleet Mute. So with all this going on, we've had blizzard conditions on the backside of the low in the cold air with the north winds there across the Kuskokwim Delta up through Bethel. Some areas here will end up with 2 feet of snow. Now, the heavy rain, low ceilings, fog, gusty winds are still setting up here through areas of the Alaska Range. There has been minor flooding along areas of south central. And by later this Sunday night into Monday, we have another feed of moisture coming up into the Panhandle, the coastal, intercoastal mountains and higher elevations there. It'll be a wet snow, whereas sea level up through the lower elevations, it'll be just cold rain. Now, for Monday afternoon, we find IFR conditions all along the Gulf Coast, especially from Prince William Sound eastward through the northern and central outer Panhandle, and then a large blob of IFR conditions along the Arctic coast, including the Beaufort Sea, Chukchi Sea coastline, and the Brooks Range north slope down into the middle Yukon Valley. And for Tuesday, remember I said there's going to be this secondary low that just lingers over Kotzebue Sound. So that's going to keep these low ceilings and visibilities going here throughout much of the northern west side of the state. Meanwhile, another piece splits eastward. We may find some improvement between the Alaska Range and Yukon River in some areas of the interior, as well as going up through Cook Inlet and the lower Matsu valleys. IFR conditions expected Tuesday morning across the southern Panhandle. There's going to be another low come up with another round of precipitation as we go through Tuesday in the Panhandle. And then again, this lingering area of IFR conditions will finally begin to lift by Tuesday afternoon, but we do find that with that next little system, more at least lower elevation rain with higher elevation snows here over sections of the Panhandle. And much colder air is going to be working its way eastward across the mainland here through the midweek. In fact, low temperatures in through the central interior and southwest interior will be well below zero. Some areas are going to be in the 20s and 30s below after seeing temperatures that have been near or above freezing. So on Monday, expect IFR conditions there in the Brooks Range, Anaktuvuk, and Adigan passes, because we're still dealing with low pressure that's going to be splitting one section going back toward Kotzebue Sound, the other heading east along the south slopes of the Brooks Range toward the Yukon Flats. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR becoming MVFR. Rainy Pass also starting out Monday, IFR becoming MVFR, and then Windy Pass should still hold on to IFR conditions. Isabel Pass, IFR in the morning becoming MVFR. Mentasta Pass far enough east may dry out enough there to get to VFR in the afternoon. As we drop southward across the Copper River Basin, Tanita Pass, IFR becoming MVFR. And generally speaking, areas along the Gulf Coast, including much Prince William Sound, IFR conditions expected throughout the day on Monday and extending eastward into the northern panhandle. Chilcoot and White will be IFR on Monday. So the freezing levels aloft, the warmest air aloft, is shifting now to the east into northwest central Canada and pushing southward along the British Columbia coast. We still have freezing levels up to around and above 6,000 feet in the southern panhandle, around 8,000 feet height of Kauai. The surface freezing line will be pushing eastward as well. It's going to cool down across south central as well as into the panhandle as we go through midweek once we get that second system by after Tuesday into Wednesday. But back through here, some very cold Arctic air from Siberia will settle into the southwest interior and then spread eastward. And the Alaska range will kind of be the buffer where the coldest readings will be west and north of the Alaska range. We're looking at 20s and 30s below in here as we go through the midweek period, starting Tuesday morning and especially Wednesday into Thursday. And so here is what we have left of the icing situation given the precipitation-bearing clouds. And we find moderate icing along areas of the Gulf Coast as that atmospheric river begins to weaken and point more into the panhandle, above 6,000 and 8,000 feet there. And then as we get into the southwest interior, above 3,000, 4,000 feet, as well as up there along the Brooks Range, because there's just been this plume of moisture that's been pulled back. The air initially warmer, it is modifying as that Arctic air comes in behind the low pressure. We have an impressive upper level wind field here given at 30,000 feet jet stream level. We have a broad trough over the Chukchi Sea, west side of the state, northern Bering Sea, and ahead of it, 160 knot jet max with southwest flow out of the North Pacific across the Gulf into the northern panhandle. To a lesser extent, not as strong, a jet core of 115 knots, northwest flow there out across the central Bering into the central and eastern Aleutians. At 9,000 feet, we still have some strong winds aloft here at 700 millibars through the Alaska Range into northwest Canada. So there'll still be areas of turbulence there of the Alaska Range and some gusty winds as a couple of frontal systems work their way east. The main mid-level low circulation here up over the middle Yukon, west central parts of the mainland. And then at 3,000 feet, we find still winds out over the Gulf in the 35 to 45 knot range, isolated though, not as widespread as what we saw early in the weekend. The strongest winds on the backside of the low that parks itself over Kotzebue Sound. We find winds out of the northeast at 45 to 55 knots from the Lisburne Peninsula around Point Hope down through the Bering Strait. We expect those strongest winds, and then when we look to see what we have for turbulence, along the Gulf Coast, quite a bit of moderate turbulence, still surface to 6,000 feet, still could be a little low-level wind shear. Still within the Alaska Range, surface to 15,000 feet. And then as we work our way back, we find here in the northwest, there could be isolated severe turbulence there near the Bering Strait, but we are talking considerable moderate turbulence there across areas of the Chukchi Sea coast, Bering Strait to St. Lawrence, and even there along the sections of the Yukon Delta on Monday from the surface to 3,000 feet.